everybody, it's Maggie Mulhern. We are here in Fair Lawn, New Jersey for a wonderful Lakme presentation. Behind me there is Wendy Bond. And I'm just going to pan just a few of the people here. We're at a nice big class. People are learning all about color contouring. I'm going to flip this around, and Wendy, we only have her for a few minutes. She's going to give us some tips, techniques, and a great demo. So, Miss Wendy.
Thank you, Maggie. So my first model is your average girl. She comes to the salon. She doesn't really want highlights. She's booked for a glaze. Maybe she's never had color before. What are we going to do with her? Well, putting a glaze on is always nice, but what if we could make that glaze have a little more pop? What if we could do something that ensures she's going to see the glaze and create movement on a flat vertical shape? Because I find what's difficult about straight, silky hair is creating movement when you know that hair is just going to hang straight at the end of the day. And I'm talking from someone who has that kind of hair. So what I'm going to ask you to think about is when I talk about color contouring, I'm looking at the client's shape, I'm looking at their length, and the one thing you have to realize is contouring is different than highlighting. I can do it with a darker tone, I can do it with a lighter tone. I can pre-lighten and glaze over the hair. So in this case, my model is about a level 6. We're going to pre-lighten her somewhere to maybe like an 8, and then we're going to glaze over her with a 7. So what I'm going to do is very subtle, but it will be impactful, and you will see a shift in tone. But because it's going to be a subtle technique, I have to make the technique very strong. So first I'm just going to look at her. You've had your consultation, you said, okay, so I know you don't want a big commitment, I know you don't necessarily want an ombre, but you want to see a change. You want to see a brighter you, a warmer you. So what I'm going to do is just start by taking a diagonal section from sort of like the top of the hairline to about just behind the ear. I like to work on diagonals. I like to also work across the round of the head because I feel like when I do this, the hair really moves and flows with the way she's going to push her hair. So first I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start with a small amount of K-Blonde. You can just use your hand. If you feel like you need to, you can put, a piece of foil down just to protect the client's skin. But a lot of times I think the big mistake is we don't always start with the end in mind. So when I say that, I mean, I'm looking at this particular piece of hair and I say, I want to color this. So instead of starting here, I'm actually starting at the bottom, and I am going to take a fairly large, dense section. So it's opaque. I'm going to start in the middle of the section. I'm using the corner of my brush, and I'm going to walk that color up the hair. And I'm definitely going from like a heavier to a narrower, heavier at the bottom, narrower at the top application. I'm going to grab a little piece of foil to act as like my gloves. So I'm not going to wear gloves, but I am going to just use a piece of foil to protect my hand. So there's two things that affect this. One is where I apply the product, so where I'm applying the light or my brightness. The other one is how wet this is. So I'm going from a slightly wetter to a slightly drier saturation. But again, I'm going to do a very bold piece. I'm going to do both sides of the underneath just to give it a little more pop. And then I'm just going to let that go. So I need to think about where I want that next piece to lay. I need to also think about what's going to lay over that. So again, I'm going to create some very bold pieces. Just turn it a little bit so everybody can see. Can you guys see over there? So again, that's my first contouring piece. Now what makes this technique work is also that no matter how big the pieces I pick up are, I'm not saturating the entire strand. I'm mostly saturating the surface. And I am only going to lift it anywhere from 2 to 2.5 shades. So it's not like your traditional highlight where you feel like you're going to lift, 4 levels, 3 levels, and you're doing many, many pieces. So again, I always prefer to start in the middle. I go from a wetter application into a slightly drier application and more of a feathery stroke. So you're just sort of pressing, and you're going light, light, light. I'm going to use my piece of foil as my little fake glove. And I'm going to press a little bit more through the mids and ends. So again, part of what makes contouring work is now I'm going to mirror my section. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm not going to worry about if the hair has a piece of plastic or anything to kind of separate it. I'm going to go ahead because I want to be able to see where I put my last contouring. And I just don't think, again, the product is not going to shift so much that I need to be worried about if it touches the other hair. If you wanted to use a piece of plastic or something to separate it, you could, but I don't really feel like in this case it's necessary. So again, I'm just lightly looking at where I dropped that hair. I'm going to gently comb over that. So I can just see my contouring, I can see it on the underneath. I'm going to sort of make the two sections kind of mix. So I've got a good visual on where my previous section was. I'm sort of looking, I think with any of these techniques you're going to notice that the hardest part is probably the first not the first section, but just picking up that hair. So again, I'm going to sort of look and see where do I want to start with. I'm going to start with this piece. I'm going to move closer to her face. And again, start with that wetter application. Kind of drag it forward. So you can see at the top, I mean, the section can be very, very large, but I'm not painting the entire section. I'm just painting what I want to. And again, I'm going from a wetter to a drier application. Or drier to wetter, sorry. So again, just kind of pressing that in. I'm going to go ahead and kind of look at the front of her hair and say, okay, so I know that I'm coming to the center. I'm going to go ahead and start to coordinate, enter in some of this particular piece, and then I'm going to turn her and do the other side. One thing I like to do with almost all my highlight clients, or anytime I'm doing any kind of creative placement, is sometimes we forget that our chair turns. It's like when you forget that you have a mirror and you only use your mirror to talk to your client versus turning your client and using your mirror to check your length, to check your outline, because your mirror doesn't lie, but also I think we tend to work very close as stylists. So when you actually turn your client from side to side, I feel like it kind of gives you a nice fresh perspective on how their hair falls and how they wear their hair. Almost like when the client gets up and walks away from the chair, you get the best view of their hair. So again, don't just sort of work with your chair in one position. Feel free to kind of turn your chair and work side to side. So once I do this one, I've done 2 sections. I'm going to do one more piece to overlay on my back panel, because again, this is going to be very subtle. So if I don't stack my color or stack my sections, I'm not going to create that width and that movement that I want to create on that flat surface.
Can we ask questions, Wendy?
Sure.
What volume are you using, and how long would you ultimately process this?
So today, because I'm working on a mannequin, I am using 40 volume, but on a real person, I probably use 20, maybe 30. And most of that would be dictated by how much time I have. So again, I wouldn't hesitate to use 30 volume. I wouldn't use 10 because when you're doing this uneven application, the 10 is just not going to necessarily get you bright enough. So again, I'd use 20 or 30, and I would let it process, you know, anywhere from probably like, again, I think it's hard as colorists to sometimes adjust that we're not going for a very strong effect. Probably anywhere from like 15 to maximum 25, 30 minutes. So again, you can see I'm just really kind of fading it in for you guys here. And again, it looks kind of scary. You're going to be like, oh my God, she looks like a candy cane. It's going to be like a, you know, a stripy pole, but it really won't. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's not completely saturated, and the fact that it's that drier to wetter, so it's going to have a soft kind of fade. And the sections I'm sort of taking it on that round angle of the head. So now I'm going to turn her, I'm going to work on the other side. So again, I think as stylists, sometimes we tend to work all the way on one side of the head. I'm always turning my clients. I feel like it gives me a better flow for my work. And it also gives me even processing time. So I don't have to worry too much if I start on one side. I'm going to do 2 or 3 sections, then I'm going to switch her to the other side, and I'm going to keep working my way around the head. The last place I'll probably do will be the back, and that's just more out of convenience for me for sectioning. You know, just not trying to make it too difficult. So does anybody else have any questions before I start this side? So again, it's very, very, you know, interesting, but I think so many times, again, we start, I think it's really important in today's work, especially with anything interesting, is that your work doesn't have to be symmetric, but it should look balanced. So one of the things I'm really focusing on is, I'm going to put about the same number of sections, but I don't have to worry about if I put them in the exact same place. I don't have to worry if they're the exact same size. I just don't want a really large one and then a really skinny one. They can sort of shift, and I feel like, again, when we can make our work a little bit more, you know, not erratic, but a little bit more organic in the way we place things and not sort of force ourselves to do it in such a rigid pattern, I feel like it gives all our work a fresh look, and I feel like it's something that will really make your client stand out. So again, I'm sort of looking at this piece. I'm going to do one closer up, and I'm just starting in a little further back on this side. Again, I always prefer to start in the middle, using the corner of my brush. Because I'm only going to lift her about 2 levels, or 2.5 levels, and then I also know, I already told you, I'm going to glaze over her with a level 7. If I don't make these pieces strong enough, they're just going to disappear. So again, I think there was a time when we felt like every time we lightened hair, we had to keep it light. My goal with going back over this with like a level 7 in a warmer tone is going to be just to create like a glimmer in the hair. So like a glimmer of color, a shift in tone, so that she has a little bit more brightness, and that gloss that I end up using comes alive on this particular client. So again, start in the middle. It should go really quickly. Like, what I love about this technique is you spend sort of like maybe 10 or 15 minutes consulting with your client. The highlights in real-time salon life shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes max to put in. You're gonna go ahead and let her process. You're gonna shampoo her. You're either gonna towel dry her extremely well, and the difference between wet and damp is that you can definitely color damp hair, and you can definitely color damp hair with Lakme, either gloss or any of our products. When you pull your fingers through the hair, there shouldn't be any beads of moisture. It should just look maybe a little shiny, but no actual water droplets. If you pull your fingers through the hair and you see actual water, then the hair's too wet. So rough dry it, towel dry it, use a wubby, something just to get the moisture out. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply my gloss. So I'll do my gloss color for 20 minutes at the second part of this technique.
What if she had a lot of color on her hair already?
So if she had previously colored hair, this is actually a good technique for that, because again, people with previously colored hair, especially when they're trying to go lighter overall, I do this a lot on my clients that have very long hair and they have gray coverage and they're trying to gradually go lighter. I'll paint these kind of foils in, or kind of highlights in, and then I'll gradually glaze them, and I'll do it each time, and I'll get them lighter and lighter without like stripping all their color. I think the only thing is if she had a lot of demarcation, you would have to be careful as far as what volume you use, and I would maybe use 2 different volumes. So if she had 3 inches of natural and the rest was colored, I'd use a higher volume at the bottom. But I actually find it works great for clients that have previously colored hair, when you're just looking to brighten it up. So again, I'm going to take another section, still working on that round, kind of diagonal. And again, I'm taking really big sections. I mean, you can see I'm not worried about taking super fine sections. It's really dense. I can't really see through it very easily, but I can see where my previously color was placed. So again, I can start in the front and work back. I kind of like to just create that guide of where I'm going to put the color.
I have a question. The density or the texture of your color here, it's a little tacky. I mean, what is the ideal texture, and that's probably not the right word.
Right.
Yeah.
You could
consistency.
I would say that you can do this with any, with our K-Blond lightener mixed, 1 to 2 or 1 to 1.5. Our lightener doesn't swell; it sort of stays where you put it. You can make it a little runnier, but you definitely want to have it so that it has a little bit of like grip when you put it on the hair. You could also do it with, a cream color. So you could do it. What I love about our product is even with our demi, if you were doing this for say like low lights, like this same contouring could be applied for low lights. Maybe she's getting a single process. She's got a lot of blonde hair. She's about a level 10. She says, I'm thinking of going darker, but I don't really like the look of low lights. So the difference is, because these are such bold pieces, in the past, if you maybe had like somebody who was a 7, but she gets a lot of highlights and her highlights are 10 and she's overly blonde, you're not going to contour with a level 7. I could use 9 or an 8, because that client doesn't want to see a dark stripe. She just wants to see a shift in tone. So when you're doing these really big pieces for a contouring or adding dimension to a blonde, I only go 1 level darker than maybe their color, and I'll use a gloss. Because I'm doing such big pieces, I'm not looking to get a dark stripe, I'm just looking to break up that solid blondness, and it works really well. But again, you wouldn't use as dark a product as you traditionally would have.
That was Wendy Bond, Lakme. We're in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Thank you, she's great.